The crowd at Madison Square Garden had seen it all. Legends born, dynasties shattered, and battles fought so fiercely that echoes of roars and groans still seemed to ripple through the rafters. But tonight, there was a different kind of electricity threading its way through the air, a restless energy building from the moment the event was announced. Two names, blazing in bold letters across every screen and poster. Mike Tyson versus Cody Rhodes. A match no one expected, but everyone wanted. Tyson, the man who had dominated the world of boxing with ferocity and precision, a name synonymous with power. Even after his retirement, his shadow loomed over the sport like a mountain that no one could quite climb. The aura of a man who had faced monsters in the ring and emerged victorious, his fists like wrecking balls guided by the instincts of a predator. For years, he had dabbled in various fields, acting, business, exhibitions, yet the hunger to test himself against something new, something unpredictable, had never truly faded. Cody Rhodes, on the other hand, had carved out his own legacy in a world where storytelling and physicality blended into a brutal art form. Wrestling royalty by blood and grit, his journey had been paved with struggle and triumph. He had forged himself into a star by wrestling against the weight of expectation, the burden of his family's name, and his own desire to stand apart. Known for his resilience and his capacity to surprise even the most seasoned opponents, Rhodes had proven himself time and again. Yet the challenge before him now was unlike anything he had ever faced. What had begun as a playful exchange during a podcast interview had ignited a firestorm of speculation. Tyson had casually mentioned his interest in trying his hand at a wrestling match, his curiosity piqued by the spectacle and athleticism of the sport. Rhodes, upon hearing the comment, extended an invitation with a grin that hinted at both respect and challenge. It was meant to be a friendly gesture, a nod from one performer to another, but the media, hungry for the next big story, spun it into something more. The idea had grown like a living thing, feeding off the attention of fans and analysts alike. A legend of the boxing world stepping into a wrestling ring? It was almost too good to be true. Yet the more Tyson thought about it, the more it seemed like a puzzle he couldn't resist solving. And Rhodes, never one to back down from a chance to push boundaries, embraced the idea with the same fervor that had propelled him through countless battles. The announcement had come with all the theatrics one might expect from a major wrestling event. A darkened arena, spotlights slicing through the darkness as a video package played out on the massive screen above. Clips of Tyson's greatest knockouts, fists hammering down with the precision of a sculptor's chisel, Rhodes delivering finishing moves with elegance and brutality alike, his face a mask of pure focus. Two different worlds colliding, yet somehow it made perfect sense. Tyson trained for the match with the same intensity that had defined his prime. But this was different. Wrestling required a different kind of endurance, a different kind of control. He worked under the guidance of seasoned wrestlers, learning how to adapt his power and precision to the choreography and unpredictability of the ring. And all the while, he couldn't shake the excitement that thrummed beneath his skin. Rhodes prepared just as tirelessly, aware that he wasn't just facing an opponent, he was facing a legend. The pressure mounted with every interview, every promotional segment where Tyson's name was uttered with a mixture of awe and fear. But Rhodes thrived under pressure. It had been his constant companion since he stepped into the spotlight, and he welcomed it now like an old friend. As the night of the event approached, the world watched with anticipation that bordered on obsession. Social media platforms exploded with predictions, arguments, and wild theories. The most dedicated fans debated strategies, Tyson's raw power versus Rhodes' adaptability. And through it all, a single question loomed larger than the rest. Would Tyson's ferocity translate to the wrestling ring, or would Rhodes' mastery of the craft prove insurmountable? The arena was a living beast, pulsing with the excitement of thousands. When the lights dimmed and the opening chords of entrance music rattled through the air, the reaction was deafening. Tyson emerged first, his expression stoic, but his eyes alive with that familiar hunger. He walked with a purpose, his fists clenched, shoulders rolling with the casual menace of a man who has stepped into countless battles. Rhodes followed, his entrance a masterclass in theatricality and confidence. Where Tyson radiated danger, Rhodes exuded charisma. He moved with a swagger that spoke of someone who had faced doubters and triumphed, his gaze steady as he approached the ring. And then they stood face to face. The crowd's roar became a low, rumbling thunder as the referee called for the bell. Tyson's eyes narrowed, his body tensed like a coiled spring. Rhodes, by contrast, maintained a calculated calm, his posture loose but ready. They circled each other, testing the distance, the atmosphere between them thick with anticipation. It wasn't just a match, it was a collision of worlds. Tyson lunged forward, his speed shocking for a man of his size. Rhodes dodged, but only barely, his eyes widening at the intensity of the attack. The audience gasped, their voices rising like a wave crashing against the shore. Tyson pressed the advantage, his fists flashing like lightning as he sought to overwhelm Rhodes before he could find his footing. But Rhodes had built his career on resilience. He absorbed the blows, redirecting Tyson's power whenever he could, his movements fluid and precise. The crowd was enthralled, their attention riveted on the clash unfolding before them. Tyson's strikes were thunderous, each one carrying the weight of years spent perfecting the art of destruction. Rhodes countered with creativity and agility, weaving through Tyson's onslaught like a dancer avoiding falling blades. But then, with a suddenness that defied expectation, Tyson caught Rhodes with a thunderous uppercut that rattled him to his core. Rhodes stumbled, his vision blurring for a split second. Tyson moved to capitalize, his fists cocked and ready to unleash devastation. And yet, even as the audience erupted in disbelief, Rhodes managed to plant his feet, his expression shifting from pain to determination. The crowd's roars became a tangled blend of encouragement and dread, their energy feeding the storm brewing within the ring. Tyson's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into something between a grin and a snarl. He could see the fire in Rhodes' gaze, the stubborn refusal to back down. For the first time, Tyson wondered if his own determination was about to be tested in ways he hadn't anticipated. Rhodes adjusted his stance, breathing deeply as he prepared for the next exchange. But before he could make his move, Tyson launched forward with a ferocity that seemed almost unnatural, one last surge of power that threatened to shatter everything Rhodes had built. And then, just as their bodies collided once more, something happened that would change everything. The collision was violent, a brutal clash of strength, and that left the audience gripping their seats with white-knuckle tension. Tyson's fists were a relentless blur, each strike aimed with surgical precision. Yet Rhodes moved like he was built from resilience itself, his instincts sharper now, his movements less about evasion and more about strategy. He countered Tyson's assaults with quick holds and staggering slams, his wrestling expertise coming to life like a creature released from a cage. But Tyson was learning too. The nuances of the wrestling ring weren't lost on him, and his sheer adaptability began to show through the brutality. When Rhodes tried to lock him into a hold, Tyson twisted free with a suddenness that left even the seasoned commentators stunned. The crowd's roaring approval fed the madness, their shouts a wild chorus driving both men to push harder. Still, Rhodes couldn't help but notice something unsettling. Tyson's stamina wasn't fading. In fact, the man seemed to be feeding off the chaos, growing more focused with each passing minute. It was as if the boxing legend had embraced the wrestling ring's unpredictability, his footwork adjusting, his power merging with a newfound flexibility. Their exchanges grew faster, fiercer. Rhodes' calculated strikes met Tyson's raw ferocity in an unending storm of motion. Sweat glistened beneath the harsh lights, their bodies colliding and parting like forces of nature fighting for dominance. It was a spectacle few had dared to imagine. Tyson's fists now tempered with restraint, while Rhodes found himself leaning into his opponent's style, meeting power with power in moments of sheer desperation. Just when the battle seemed to settle into a rhythm, Rhodes saw his opening. Tyson had lunged forward, his stance momentarily overextended. Rhodes spun with a precision born from years of training, locking Tyson into a hold that twisted his arm and brought him down to one knee. The crowd's roar hit like a tidal wave, their excitement frenzied as Rhodes strained to keep the larger man pinned. But Tyson didn't struggle. Instead, his eyes narrowed, his expression shifting from pain to something far more chilling, calculation. Before Rhodes could react, Tyson used the leverage against him, pulling Rhodes into a sudden reversal that slammed him hard against the mat. The impact rattled his bones, pain flaring up his spine as he gasped for breath. Rhodes rolled away, clutching his ribs, his mind racing to piece together what had just happened. Tyson's move had been too smooth, too refined for someone supposedly new to wrestling. The realization hit him like a cold punch to the gut. Tyson hadn't just trained for this match. He had studied Rhodes. Every move, every signature hold, every feint and flourish. Tyson had been preparing not to adapt but to counter. It was a revelation that sent chills racing down Rhodes' spine. This wasn't a casual exhibition match for Tyson. This was something deeper, something personal. Had Tyson seen Rhodes' invitation as a challenge to his legacy, or worse, as an opportunity to prove his own dominance over a sport he had no claim to? But there was no time to dwell on it. Tyson was on him again, his attacks more precise than before. Where his strikes had once been pure force, now they carried the weight of strategy. Rhodes found himself forced into defensive maneuvers, his own counters becoming desperate as he struggled to regain control of the match. The crowd could sense the shift, their energy feeding the spectacle even as they wondered who would break first. Rhodes' supporters shouted words of encouragement, their voices growing frantic as Tyson's relentless assault continued. But Rhodes' mind wasn't on the pain or the pressure. It was on Tyson's eyes, sharp, almost predatory. And then, in the midst of the chaos, Tyson did something no one expected. After landing a brutal combination that left Rhodes staggering, Tyson stepped back, not out of fatigue or mercy, but with a deliberate calmness that sent a ripple of confusion through the arena. He glanced at Rhodes with a smirk that was more challenge than mockery. "I thought you'd be better." Tyson's voice cut through the noise like a blade, low and taunting. "Guess I was wrong." The words stung more than any punch. Rhodes felt the heat of embarrassment prickling at his skin, his own frustration coiling tight within his chest. Tyson wasn't just trying to beat him physically, he was dismantling his confidence piece by piece. It was a tactic Rhodes had used himself in the past, taunting opponents to break their focus and exploit their rage. But to have it used against him, and so effectively, was a blow he hadn't been prepared for. Rhodes pushed himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. He couldn't let Tyson dictate the pace of the match. Not if he wanted to survive. Ignoring the pain, he charged forward, his fists flying in a flurry of strikes meant to throw Tyson off balance. But Tyson met him head-on, their bodies clashing in a brutal exchange that left the audience gasping with every hit. Rhodes grappled with Tyson, trying to force him into a corner, but Tyson's sheer strength turned every hold into a struggle for survival. As the minutes dragged on, Rhodes felt his stamina slipping. His breath came in harsh, shallow gulps, his body aching from the relentless barrage Tyson unleashed. Yet, through the haze of exhaustion, he saw something flicker across Tyson's face, a momentary hint of strain. It was the first sign of weakness Rhodes had seen since the match began, and it was enough to ignite a spark of hope. But before he could press the advantage, Tyson shifted tactics again. Instead of attacking, he stepped back, his posture relaxed yet alert. "Is that all you've got?" Tyson's voice was calm, almost mocking. "I thought wrestling was supposed to be tougher than this." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some laughing, others jeering. Rhodes' pride burned hot, his frustration boiling over. Tyson was playing him, using mind games to chip away at his resolve. But if Tyson thought Rhodes would crumble so easily, he was in for a surprise. Taking a breath, Rhodes steadied himself, his gaze locked on Tyson with a determination that bordered on madness. This was no longer about reputation or spectacle. It was about proving something to himself, and perhaps to Tyson as well. But just as Rhodes prepared to launch his next attack, something unexpected happened. A sound from the audience, shouting, but not in excitement or anger. Something else entirely. Rhodes' focus wavered for a split second, his gaze flickering toward the disturbance. And that was all the opening Tyson needed. The disturbance from the crowd rippled through the arena like an electric current. Rhodes hesitated, his instincts torn between the roar of the audience and the fight raging before him. Tyson, however, remained a force of unrelenting purpose, his eyes locked on Rhodes with a hunger that hadn't diminished in the slightest. But then Rhodes saw it, a flicker of something unsettling in Tyson's expression. Fatigue, yes, but also doubt. as if the man who'd seemed invincible was beginning to question whether his dominance was truly unshakable. It was a crack in Tyson's armor, subtle but real. Rhodes' heartbeat quickened, his senses sharpening with the realization that he still had a chance. Drawing on every ounce of resolve he had left, Rhodes launched himself at Tyson with a ferocity that surprised even him. No longer was he trying to outmatch Tyson's brute strength. Instead, he aimed to outwit him. Feints and grapples intertwined with sudden strikes, each movement calculated to throw Tyson off balance. And it worked, at least for a moment. Tyson stumbled, his footing faltering under the onslaught. Rhodes seized the advantage, driving his shoulder into Tyson's midsection and slamming him against the ropes. The crowd erupted, their cheers frenzied and raw, as Rhodes pinned Tyson with a hold meant to sap his strength. But Tyson wouldn't be broken so easily. With a roar that seemed to echo from someplace deeper than mere determination, Tyson broke free from Rhodes' grip and retaliated with a flurry of blows that left Rhodes reeling. The power behind Tyson's fists was staggering, his sheer force crashing against Rhodes like an unforgiving tide. Pain coursed through Rhodes' body, but so did something else, an unyielding need to prove himself. Tyson's earlier taunts had cut deep, his condescension igniting a fire within Rhodes that refused to be extinguished. And somewhere within that pain, Rhodes found clarity. He didn't need to match Tyson's power. He needed to make Tyson lose control. Feigning exhaustion, Rhodes stumbled backward, his breathing ragged and eyes glassy. Tyson advanced, his instincts urging him to press the advantage. But Rhodes was waiting for it, his own desperation masked by the calculated deception. As Tyson lunged, Rhodes sidestepped with a suddenness that left Tyson off balance. Without hesitation, Rhodes wrapped his arms around Tyson's torso and executed a perfectly timed suplex, slamming the former boxer into the mat with a force that seemed to shake the entire arena. The audience roared, their collective gasp giving way to wild applause. For the first time, it felt like the momentum had truly shifted. Rhodes could feel the adrenaline pulsing through him, his senses sharpened by the taste of possibility. But Tyson wasn't done. Before Rhodes could capitalize on his advantage, Tyson rose with a fury that bordered on madness. His eyes blazed with a determination that defied pain. His body coiled like a predator poised to strike. Rhodes braced himself, his own strength rapidly fading as Tyson charged. Their final clash was nothing short of brutal. Fists collided with flesh, grapples twisted into desperate attempts to gain the upper hand. The match had become something more than a spectacle. It was a test of willpower, of endurance, of pride. Rhodes could feel his stamina slipping, his muscles trembling from the relentless punishment. But Tyson wasn't faring much better. His breaths were ragged, his movements growing heavier as exhaustion clawed at him. And then, with a suddenness that left the audience breathless, Tyson's knee buckled. It was a slight misstep, barely perceptible, but Rhodes caught it. Summoning the last of his strength, he launched himself forward and delivered a finishing move that left Tyson sprawled on the mat, dazed and struggling to rise. The bell rang, its sound both triumphant and surreal. Rhodes collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving as he tried to process what had just happened. The referee's voice boomed over the speakers, declaring Rhodes the victor. The arena erupted with cheers and disbelief, their excitement a storm of emotions that seemed to pulse through the very air. Tyson remained on the mat for a moment longer before pushing himself up, his gaze locking onto Rhodes with something other than resentment. There was respect there, mingling with the fierce competitiveness that had driven him throughout the match. Rhodes expected Tyson to storm out of the ring, his pride wounded by the defeat. But instead, Tyson extended a hand. It was a gesture so unexpected that Rhodes stared for a moment before grasping it. Tyson's grip was firm, his expression unreadable. "You proved me wrong," Tyson said, his voice rough but genuine, respect. The crowd's cheers only grew louder as the two men stood side by side, the intensity of their battle replaced by a mutual acknowledgement that few could understand. Whatever rivalry had existed between them, it had been forged into something stronger by the match's brutal conclusion. Yet just as Rhodes began to feel the weight of his victory settle, a voice echoed through the arena speakers. It was the promoter, his words dripping with excitement. "What a match! But gentlemen, what if I told you?" this was only the beginning. Confusion rippled through the crowd, their cheers giving way to murmurs of curiosity. Rhodes exchanged a glance with Tyson, the exhaustion still clinging to them both. But the gleam in the promoter's eye suggested something bigger, something neither of them had expected. The audience once more, the promoter continued. A rematch, with a twist, a best-of-3 series. And the winner will not only claim glory, but a prize unlike anything the world has ever seen. The revelation hit Rhodes like a punch to the gut. He had just given everything he had to defeat Tyson, and now he was being asked to do it all over again. Tyson's grin, however, suggested he was already considering the challenge. Rhodes felt a mix of dread and exhilaration surge through him. The battle may have ended, but the war was far from over, and somewhere deep down, he couldn't help but feel a thrill at the thought of facing Tyson again. Because now, it wasn't just about proving himself. It was about making history.